Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to class number 2 in our series called Days Are Coming, Exile and Redemption. So last week we were focusing on, we said, can Jews thrive in the diaspora, and it was primarily about, what are we doing in the diaspora, and all of that. So this week we begin with a very interesting and perhaps in a way very obvious question, but nonetheless necessary to ask in order to be able to explore the different levels of the answer. So throughout history, we know that the belief in the coming of Mashiach has really been a huge part of the Jewish people's belief. It's not just something that maybe one day could be will come, but really it's been a huge part of something that Jewish people believe. To the degree that there's a very famous teaching from the Rambam, which you can see up on the screen right now, or if you have the textbook in front of you, it's on page 19, where the Rambam says, "V'chol mi she'eino ma'amin boi," anyone who does not believe in Mashiach, or someone that does not await his coming. So not only is he denying the statement of the many, many prophets, because we know that throughout the books of the prophets, the Nevi'im, they are filled with the prophecies of the coming of Mashiach. So not only is he not only is he denying the prophets, but even he is denying the Torah of Moses, our teacher. Shaharei HaTorah ha'ida alav, because the Torah, as in the 5 books of Moses, also testifies to the coming of Mashiach. Where is that? That is from the book of Deuteronomy, where it says, "V'shav Hashem Elokecha shvuscha," God will return, will bring back your captives, v'richamecha, and he will have mercy on you, v'shav v'kibetzcha, and he will gather you from among the many nations. So the Rambam says that if a person doesn't believe in Mashiach and doesn't await Mashiach, then he's considered to be a non-believer, a kofar, a heretic, not only in the prophets, but even in the Torah of Moses, our teacher. We also know that the Gemara says, the Talmud tells us, very interesting, that when a person passes and comes to the next world, so there's a list of questions that they ask him. And the first question that they ask him is one of the first questions that they ask him is if he awaited the Mashiach. So we see that believing and awaiting for Mashiach is not just, let's live our lives and we believe that one day Mashiach will come, but it's very central and very fundamental to what a Jew believes. In fact, I'm sure everyone or many of you know that we are obligated, we are required, we're supposed to pray 3 times a day, with the central prayer of each one of those prayers being what's called the Amidah, or the Shmona Esrei. And if you read through the Shmona Esrei, you have at least, so the Shmona Esrei is 19 blessings requesting different things. At least 6 of those is in a very straightforward, direct way, asking Hashem, asking God for Mashiach and for the redemption. As you can see on the screen or on page 19 as well in your textbook, here is at least 2 sentences from those prayers. The first one is Eschemach David Avdacha Mehera Satzmiach, speedily cause the scion of David to flourish, which is again the idea of waiting for Mashiach. Or in a different paragraph, the second sentence is a different prayer. It says, "V'techazena eineinu b'shuvcha leTzion barachamim." May our eyes behold your return to Zion with mercy. So every day, 3 times a day, at least 6 of those blessings is a request for Mashiach. Plus, every time a person eats bread, and then, or even other things, and after he eats, he's going to make the blessing after the grace after meals, called the benching, again, he's going to ask for Mashiach. We say, V'nei Yerushalayim Ira Kodesh, right? Asking God to rebuild Jerusalem. So, on the average day, the person is probably asking for Mashiach, asking for God to send his anointed one and redeem us at least 18 or 20 times. So for 2,000 years, Jews have been 20 times a day, every single Jew saying to God, send Mashiach, send Mashiach, send Mashiach, send Mashiach, etc. So what we're bringing out with this idea is that it's not like a side thing, like, oh, by the way, Jews kind of believe in the coming of Mashiach, and we really wouldn't mind if he came, and the sooner the better, that would be nice. But rather, as you see from the Rambam, that if you don't believe, and not only if you don't believe, but if you don't await, a person is denying all the Torah. We see from the prayers, etc., how intrinsic this concept of Mashiach is to our faith. Chaim. So when it comes to what's going to happen when Mashiach comes, and why it is that we're asking so much. So of course, there's been many pages written describing what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. And when you read about the magnificence, the beauty, the peace, the blessings, how wondrous and how nice of a time it will be, you can understand why we really want Mashiach. There won't be any war, there won't be any corona, there won't be any trouble, right? Everything will be fine. People will love each other. There won't be any political troubles. I mean, it will be a wonderful time. However, again, the question is kind of it's in a way, it's an obvious question, but I think it just needs to be asked so we can kind of get to the answer. But the question is, nowadays in the Western world, there are some problems and there are some issues, but in general, life is not that terrible. There's modern medicine. Most people are living with a decent amount of, poverty is not what it used to be. Now, granted, Corona kind of, if you will, makes life more difficult. But in the whole, we're desperately crying for Mashiach 20 times a day for what? Is it because these plagues in our life loom so large that every day, 20 times a day, we're saying to God, bring Mashiach so we can finally have peace and not have financial troubles and not have health issues? Is that what this is all about? So the question is, why are we asking for Mashiach so many times a day? Why is it so fundamental? Why is it so intrinsic to Judaism and to our faith? We have, again, from the Rambam, an interesting thing. So the Rambam, the famous Maimonides, who lived 1,000 years ago, he created 13 principles of faith. Which, interestingly enough, when the Rambam did create 13 principles of faith, a lot of the Rambam's colleagues, the other sages of the time, disagreed with the Rambam. They said to the Rambam, to Maimonides, it is not correct to take one belief or one principle of Judaism and turn it into a foundation of Jewish faith. Everything in Judaism is a foundation of faith. You have to believe in every single letter in the Torah. You have to believe in every single thing. Be it as it may, the Rambam has 13 things which he calls the Ikarei HaEmunah, the fundamentals, the foundations of faith. Seth, you're on 2 devices. That's why we're hearing you just need to mute.
All right, hold on.
It's okay, you just need to mute one of them. You can be on both, just mute one of them. So the Rambam, it's called the Ani Ma'amins. Each one of these 13 principles of faith, he starts with the words Ani Ma'amin. So as you can see on the screen over here, or on page 20 in your textbook, it says Ani Ma'amin Bemunah Shlema. I believe with perfect faith in the coming of Mashiach, even though he has tarried, he's taking his time. I will await him every single day. So when you talk about something being a foundation, there's a difference between something being a foundation or a central tenet. A foundation, when you say this is one of the fundamentals, one of the foundations of Jewish faith, means without it, the whole entire Judaism is not there. So, for example, a temple, having a Beit HaMikdash, a temple in Jerusalem, which we will talk about a little bit more later on, is a central theme, if you want, in Judaism. But the fact is that we can live without it. We can be Jews without it. But when you say something is a foundation, it's part of the fundamentals, that means if you take it out, the whole building crashes, the whole religion will crumble. So if you say Mashiach is a foundation, is part of the fundamentals, is part of the foundations of Judaism, then the question is, it seems a little strange because we have been living without Mashiach for 2,000 years. We have been in all sorts of places in the world. Judaism, in a way, has thrived. Right? We've provided X amount of the Nobel Peace Prizes, and we wrote a Talmud in exile. We're now in exile. So what are you saying that Mashiach is like this fundamental part of Judaism when everything seems to be fine without it? Now, granted, yes, we have some troubles, and it would be nice if Mashiach came, but why? So the question is kind of from these two angles. Why is the redemption such a central part of our prayers? Or in different words, why do we consider it to be so central and such a foundation of Judaism? We seem to have managed fine without it. And if we've lasted 2,000 years, why can we not last another 2,000 years? Anybody want to ask, comment, answer before we move on? All right. So the first answer that we're going to give to this question of why it is so foundational and so fundamental is being headed with the words incomplete Judaism. What do we mean when we say incomplete Judaism? So yes, it's true that Mashiach is going to be a miraculous utopia. Everyone's going to have all the money that they need. Everyone's going to have the health that they need. No one's going to be fighting. No one's going to be jealous, etc., etc. However, believe it or not, that is not actually the main idea, or I should say the main accomplishment of Mashiach and the era that he will usher in. The primary accomplishment of Mashiach and the era that he will usher in, believe it or not, is that Mashiach will bring Torah observance back to its completion. Again, the primary accomplishment of Mashiach meaning the anointed one who will usher in the era of redemption, is that he will return us and the world to a state, to a time where we can fulfill the Torah in its completion. Here we have text number 4 from the Rambam. It comes from the book of the Mishnah Torah, the Laws of Kings and Their Wars, chapter 11, verse 1. Says the Rambam. By the way, just as a side note, if you're wondering why we so often quote the Rambam, it's because the Rambam wrote about Mashiach in his book of Halakha, in his book of law, which most others did not do. For example, the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, didn't write about Mashiach. So the Rambam was kind of unique that he wrote the laws of, how do we define Mashiach, how do we know who Mashiach is, etc., etc. So over there, the Rambam says as follows: Hamelech HaMashiach, the Messianic king Messiah, Asid la'amoid ulahachzir malchut beit David liyoshna lememshala harishona. He will arise and restore the initial sovereignty of the Davidic dynasty. So Malchut Beit David, King David's dynasty, he will return. So we will once again have a king. Uboneh hamikdash, Mashiach will build the temple. Umekabetz nidchei Yisrael, and he will return to the laws. He will return the Jews that have been lost. And he will bring back all the laws to their initial state. That all the laws will be able to be fulfilled as they are written in the Torah. So what is Mashiach going to do? Going to return King David's dynasty, going to build a temple, bring back the Jewish people, and return all the laws that we should be able to keep the Torah in the way that we used to be able to keep it. So it's interesting. Here's the kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 line definition of Mashiach from the Rambam. And miracles are not really mentioned there. The Rambam doesn't say, Mashiach will cure the sick and he will bring back the dead, and these are all the things that he will do. He'll bring back King David's lineage, build a temple, bring the Jews back to Israel, and return us to a state where we are able to fulfill Torah and mitzvot in their completion. Now, doesn't mean Mashiach's not going to do miracles. Doesn't mean there won't be wonderful things. Those are all true. But that's not kind of the core definition of what Mashiach is. Core definition of what Mashiach is that he will once again enable us and bring the world to a place when we can fulfill the Torah and its commandments in its completion. So now I ask you, what does that mean? What is missing nowadays that Mashiach is going to do? We do mitzvot. We keep Shabbat. We put on tefillin. We keep kosher. We give our children a circumcision. I mean, how many mitzvot are we not able to do now that we need Mashiach to take us back to Israel and rebuild the temple in order for us to be able to do that? So the answer, either you know it already or it might shock you, that actually more than half of the 613 biblical commandments we are unable to do today as a result of being in exile. So let me say that again. More than half of the 613 biblical commandments we are unable to fulfill today because we are in exile.
Hey, Rabbi.
Yes. You muted yourself, so I can't hear you.